Today I'm going to try to talk about, wow, these lights are bright. I was concerned that I wouldn't have a podium. Now I'm concerned that I need sunglasses. Today I'm going to talk about what I call non-marine DHA and EPA supply. And the market as I see it in this presentation as we're trying to do is to try to talk about the fit of what non-marine supply the fit within the market, highlight a little bit around the players, and then sort of gauge the opportunity. Now, before I do that, I guess it's worthy to talk. One of the challenges in understanding this market, the non-supply, is because so many of these players are in a technology battle and a race to see who can bring the product quickest to the market, meet a demand. They don't really talk a lot. They're pretty tight-lipped. And so it's hard to get actual data to understand what's going on in the marketplace, which is different from other parts. And it kind of reminds me of a story about a Bostonian who took a ride up the coast of Maine and got lost for directions. And he had to ask directions from a guy sitting on a porch. And the guy was what they call a downeaster. And anybody who knows New Englanders know a downeaster. They kind of live on the coast and they're down from the hills. And they are viewed as kind of laid back, don't talk a lot, just sort of observe a lot and try to figure out what's going on and only talk when they need to. So this guy drives up in this big Cadillac. He comes from Harvard. He drives his car. He's up the coast. He gets lost and he gets out of the car and he beeps. And the guy's sitting on a porch on a rocking chair and says, "Hey, mister, I'm looking for directions. Can you help me?" And the guy goes, "Yeah." And as he gets out, he sees a dog, and he goes, "Hey, does your dog bite?" "Nope." And he takes a couple walks, and all of a sudden the dog jumps up, starts dragging on his leg, and he's fighting. He goes, "Hey, mister, what the heck? You said your dog didn't bite." He says, "It ain't my dog." So, with that little bit of humor, we'll step in. One thing I want to talk about is that this is not going to address DSM, which is a marvelous success story. There are people in the room who can probably tell that story better than I can, but it's a great success story for a lot of reasons. One, how they captured the market, how they dominated the market, and how they've been growing it since. But this is really talking about all the other players that are trying to fit in with the space. Borrowing from GOED, non-marine supply, as I define it, is really three things, from algae, fungi, and GMO crops. But what it really effectively means is algae, yeast, and canola, because that's where all the activity is, all right? So the key question, I think, when you look at non-marine supply, really deals with, if you're trying to understand how it fits and what it looks at, is really, are you going to create demand or are you going to steal it? It's as basic as that. If you look at the market, everybody provided nice slides on where we're selling oils and what type of oils. Do you believe that the value proposition is going to be something where you're going to sell something that isn't in the market now, meet an unmet need, and work with some partner to sell that oil, or you're going to go into the marketplace and steal stuff? And that's the biggest question I think that people have to ask when you understand the opportunity. So, stepping back now, there are a bunch of great marketers in the room, more successful than myself, I'm sure, and they have great ideas. But I think if you sit back and you really look at all the ways you can figure out how omega-3 or EPA DHA products are sold, they're really on four different concepts, or some combination of them. The source of the material, where it comes from, could be marine, non-marine, could be the type of marine, the species of fish, things like that. The process, how did you produce it? What was the result? What was the quality? All those issues. The concentration level, where is it? How high is it? Things like that. And the relative level of EPA DHA, including 0 of one and 100% of the other, right? So those are really different things. But the key is that depending on the combination of those factors, the real test is what the value that the customer sees. And that's really going to tell you whether there's an opportunity. Likewise, for non-marine oil, it's going to be whether the customer sees the value and what you can price on the value proposition. So, if you look at the hypothesis, as I've seen it, from reading, from studying, and from talking to people that would talk to me, is that basically the marine oils, non-marine oils, are jumping on the proposition that fish oil supply is limited. And shortly there won't be enough oil to meet demand and prices. Okay? that might be true. But we need to look at the numbers and then figure out what we think is really going to exist going forward, looking at some different scenarios. Now, there's also some other advantages and challenges to what comes out of the non-marine oil. One of the big issues is potentially lower cost. If you do get a really candid discussion with some of the, let's just say, the algae people, they'll talk about phenomenally low costs in production, okay? When they get there and how they get there, I'm not sure, but they talk very confidently about some amazing prices that are going to really drive lower. And they might get there. I'm not saying they're not. I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just trying to say that a lot of good things probably have to happen for that to get there, okay? One other thing is that this concept of alternate supply, there certainly is enough of established record of other products that will be able to do that. You can look at the carotenoids, beta-carotene, whether it was a natural extract or coming from algae, as well as astaxanthin, things like that. But I think the differences in these markets from fish oil is some of these price points were very, very high. If you're looking at beta-carotene, you're looking at $1,200 a kilo on a pure basis. Distinctly different from what we're looking at, okay? So when you look at using algae to get there, the economics are totally different. And of course, the deals for how you deal with the evolution of how these products came, because sometimes they start in algae and they go over to extract, sometimes they did it the other way. So those markets are a little bit different. We need to keep that in mind. Okay, so without getting thrown off the stage, I'm going to challenge a little bit of the idea. If you look at this, we talk about crude oil. We know that demand is going up. We know all these forces are going to drive it. The question is when, and when is it going to become a problem, and when is it something that the economics are going to take over? Because one of the key things is that we're in a market that is not devoid of market forces, okay? As demand goes up, prices will go up, and people will start making decisions, and businesses will start reacting to those decisions, okay? We cannot assume that our market is not elastic. If prices go up, consumers will buy less. That's what's going to happen. So we cannot look at these projections like we're going to continue to go up there. And when we start looking at supply and crude supply affecting how we can produce oil, you're going to start seeing costs go up, and that's going to affect the marketplace. So one of the key issues is people talk about this idea, and I'm not sure the exact number, but somewhere around 1 million metric tons a year of fish oil. Okay, there are 1 million metric tons, but only 300,000 metric tons goes to humans consumption. Now, I looked at some numbers from 2010 and figured out how much crude we use and everything. According to my calculation, it was about 200,000, which seems pretty much in line with what other people are saying. So the point is we're only getting 20 to 30% out of the fish oil. And the claim from a lot of people is, well, where is that fish oil going? And they say, well, it's going to the animal market, aquaculture, and other places. Well, I contend that if you look at the level of the fish oil production, over time it's been dropping down to about 1 million metric tons. And it's, we believe, stabilized at that level and sustainable from what I hear. But the average fish price is going up, so the use in aquaculture is actually going down. So from market forces, you can actually say, to date so far, we've demonstrated that as production has gone down, prices have gone up, the use in animal feed has gone down, meaning more fish oil is available for humans. Okay? How much that's going to go forward, how much of an effect it's going to have based on demand, I don't know. But we know one thing. It's already happened, and it's going to continue to happen. So if you start plugging in numbers like $6 a kilo for crude oil, you're going to start getting different effects. Because there's one thing for sure. The animal market is driven by economics. And you can argue that farm-raised salmon will no longer have omega-3s, and people won't be interested in it, so maybe there'll be a premium. Maybe you'll be able to go to the market, and you'll get omega-3 farm-raised and non-omega-3 farm-raised. But the market forces will take over. The other key thing to think about is, this is mass balance from IFO. And it's basically, oops, we go back. It's basically looking at the total mass balance of fishing. And it shows that basically we take 3.7% fish oil out of the entire market. Again, I'm not sure what the number is going forward, but I guarantee you, if people start paying a lot more or considerably more for fish oil, we're going to get better yields. The economics will drive it. Fishermen, the industry will find better ways to get more fish oil. And if that 3.7% is only yielding 1 million metric tons, all you have to do is increase it 20%, and we're at 1.2. And we only need 200,000 right now, and I think from the projections that Tim showed, we're somewhere around 500 to 600,000 in another 15, 20 years. So we still have capacity now to manage, despite all these projections. And that's assuming best case, and that's assuming no elasticity in the market. Okay, so the question, if you believe that we do have a crude oil challenge, maybe we're going to be able to get through it, so we're going to be able to do some things in oil, and more with the marine oil. So we have non-marine players now, and they're trying to figure out exactly where do they go in the market. So what are they going to do? Are they going to replace sales, or are they going to create new sales? And in this case, we look at some of these key markets on the right-hand side for the 18-12 market, or the 30% oil, depends what it is, and then all the special species oils. Okay, I contend these markets are efficient already. What that means is people are buying, people are selling. It's being marketed around the story of the individual species, and the market is doing well. Costs are low. It's efficient. Everything is in this market. I contend this is not a market where non-marine oils are going to play in, because they're not going to compete with the economics. They're just not going to do it. Maybe when there's enough scale, maybe they will. But for now, it's going to be a long time before that happens. And the reason that that's important is if you look at this, and this is 2010 data, so I apologize because some 2011, 2012 data, I don't mean to be confusing. But basically, if you look at that, what it says is that the real opportunities for non-marine oil is going to be in the concentrate market, which right now is only 6.6% of the volume. So it's a relatively small part of the market. The rest of the market, if we assume it's efficient, that's not a market you're going to play in, or your costs are going to have to be very, very low. So one of the things I thought about was to try to make simplicity or make sense of the market. When we talk about it now, we talk about concentration, we talk about ratios, we talk about all these different things in the market, and it helps us understand where we're going. But when you look at non-marine, typically the products are either all EPA or all DHA. So you really have to shift your thinking, and you've got to think of it more like drug delivery, and you've got to think it in terms of pure EPA and pure DHA, just like we do in other markets, where we break everything down to on a pure basis for vitamins, for carotenoids, things like that. They call it, crystal equivalent or something like that. And if you look at that, then the pure market in the globe right now, well, in 2010, it's about 20% high now, is somewhere right around 30,000 metric tons, of which just under 60% of it is EPA. But that doesn't tell the whole story, because that whole 30,000 tons is not really what the non-marine market's going to target. It's only going to target a subset of that, which is the concentrates. And if you look at this, it tells you that just under 4,000 metric tons of that is EPA, and 2,800 is DHA, okay, which represents about 13% and roughly 9.5% of the market, okay? But if you're looking on a pure basis and you go to the market and you figure out who's doing things with pure, it tends to be the pharmaceutical market or something that has potential, because there's a whole pipeline of products that are looking at that. And if you look at trying to do something in that space, it's roughly about 1,000 metric tons of EPA and 518 for DHA. So what that says is that you're actually targeting a relatively small market where only a few players can actually survive, because the market's not big enough to support a not large number of players. And one way to look at it is, if you're an algae player now, and this is just a generic example, but if you're an algae player and you're producing a 70% EPA, and you think that your plan, you can produce 1,000 metric tons a year, which is 700 metric tons of pure EPA, that says that you would take up 4.1% of the overall market, or almost 20% of the concentrate market, one player, okay? If you think of the fact that how many players we have there right now working at algae, you have to question whether the market can sustain all these different business cases. I contend they can't. Okay, so at a glance, if you look who's out in the space, and I'll have a couple slides I'll go through real quick of who the players are, but in the algae space, you have about 20 players globally that we found. There are probably more. There's certainly some biotech people. There's some university-related things that might not have come out. But generally, it's about 20 players. About 3 to 5 of them are focusing on products that produce exclusively EPA. The balance is DHA, which is a much bigger market. There's over $1 billion invested in these players, okay? Most of the businesses are focused on fuel, but a few are targeting nutritionals, okay? So you got to take that into account when you look at the capital, because if they're chasing fuel markets, they're very, very, very big markets. But the key is, in a lot of these algae players, is the business models have shifted. Some of them have started as fuels, and then they figured out that there's this market opportunity over in here, nutritionals. Maybe they believe it's a faster launch, faster to market, and they've said, hey, we can do this over here. So you get a kind of a muddled business model. And likewise, you have some that have even changed the name. They started out with a fuel name, and they changed it to something else. So you can see the focus. And then in the yeast side, which is much smaller, you only have about 4 or 5 players. There's one player in the market that's targeting EPA with DuPont already in the market. Probably people know that story. And then in the plant side, you really only have 3 or 4 players. One is focused on EPA. Most are focused on DHA, and there's some combined DHA and EPA. All right, I won't go through this because this was covered a little bit, but this is, the idea of if you're going to do something in algae, you actually have to think about the process and everything you put together. Because what happens when you do algae, you have this whole development process on picking the strain, getting the strain to grow, getting the environment to grow perfectly, and then you get this biomass, and then the biomass has to be extracted, and that only replaces a portion of the supply chain for fish oils. And it may be very efficient, but it's only a portion of it. And this just talks about some of the things. But the key is that in order to get there and to get the cost of all these business models, it's all based on scale. Okay, and you can't get the scale, you can't get the low cost without the scale. In some of them, you need even scope now. It used to be you focus on one product, one market, big volumes. Now you need multiple products, maybe in fuels, maybe outside of fuels. So it's something else to look at. Okay, so these slides, they're in your packs. I won't go through them, but they have some data on looking at who are the players, what kind of technology they have, whether it's open system, closed system, things like that, so you get a feel for who the players are. I just wanted to make sure you had the info. And this slide here looks at the plant side, so it gives you a feel for who's out there and what you have. I won't go over the detail. But this slide right here is key. And I'm not sure how many people in the room are aware of some of the prices that go in the marketplace. It's something that we look at all the time. It's something everybody that sells oils in the market's looking at. And my contention is that these are basic prices from within the last 5 or 6 months, and they shows you the range, whether it's an Asian-based company, North American, EU, on different types of products. And these are really, it gives you kind of an area description, but it's close enough. 30, 20, EE oil, and it shows you the price can range from $9.50 a kilo up to $19 a kilo. So my question to everybody is, what is in the business case for all these new startups? If they did a business case 3 or 4 years ago, I wouldn't be surprised if they're predicting prices 3 times what these prices are. So if they're going to come in the marketplace and think that they can sell a 70% omega-3 at $120 an hour, $120 a kilo, I'm not sure where it's going to be sold. Now, if it's pure EPA versus pure DHA, might have a story, but maybe not in dietary supplements. Maybe it has to be in another market. So I think it's a key consideration when you look forward. Okay, so then I did something that I guarantee you is wrong. I guarantee you the numbers are not right. I don't know if it's supposed to be higher or lower. I don't know that, but I wanted to play around with it just to see where it is because I've heard about these efficiencies. So I made a bunch of assumptions on the left-hand side about an open system algae production doing a 70% EPA, and then I made some assumptions on the right-hand side around fish oil concentration to get to a 70%. Okay? I'm not a manufacturer, so it's guesswork, but I think I had enough information that I could do enough to be give it worthy of consideration. So if you look at these 2 issues, the key challenge on the fish side is understanding what the fractions are. And anybody in the fish business can tell you about that. When you do concentrations, you take stuff out, and then you put some stuff aside. And the question is, what do you do with that stuff? If it goes back into the process, your cost position is better. All right? And every company that does it is pretty clever on how they figure that out. If you build one product, there's some fractions out of that you take and you do something. And that's key to figuring out the costs and the assumptions around that. Likewise, on the fermentation side, it's really determine how you get that scale. and what's your cost over time, and things like that, okay? So when I did that, I tried to play with this idea of what's the cost of goods, COGS, what's the cost of good for fermentation versus fish oil. And I went up to 1,000 metric tons. And you could argue that's not enough. You could argue you need a lot more scale to be able to get there. But as much as I figured out with all my assumptions, it still was very difficult for the fermentation people to come anywhere close to the cost of a fish oil producer. Okay? Now, if crude oil prices triple, it's going to totally change that. But my point is, I don't know in these business cases what kind of scale you need to get the costs down to the point that you think you can sell them at competitive against the fish oil. But I guarantee you, if you go back to the original market and you look at the market size and you look at the scale, you got a problem, okay? Because you have too many players searching for too small of a business with a very difficult value chain to get cost effective. Okay, so in summary, with that saying, there is a market. There absolutely is a market for non-marine EPA and DHA. It's a viable future. Whether it's viable for 15 players and whether it's viable for 15 players with a certain cost position, I don't think so. But it's definitely a viable player. It's a viable market. Depends on the scale and scope of what people need to be profitable and where they're going to compete in the value chain, in the overall EPA, DHA value chain. Okay? So that really depends on where you see the growth. Again, are you going to steal share from the existing market, or is there new growth? We know that there are a bunch of players in the pharmaceutical space now that are looking at products geared towards all EPA or all DHA. That's great. But you know what? They're probably going to latch with one or two players, and it's going to leave everybody out of the ballgame. There's not enough of those products going there forward. So with that, the market sort of appears to be what I call more of a biotech market. More when there's a big promise and it takes a lot of investment, it's going to take a lot of time to get there. I saw a presentation about 10 years ago from a professor that had tracked and worked in the biotech industry for over 20 years, and he showed all the data on stock prices and all these big curves and all these things like that. And then he shut the mic down and he said, and all the data there isn't one company that has $1 in revenue over 20 years. He didn't track the entire market. People keep throwing money from the investor community because the promise is great, but there was no revenue coming in. And I suspect that we have some similar elements. I'm not saying it's the same, but similar elements in the algae space or in the non-marine space. Okay, I think I touched on some of the other points. So it's critical, again, to figure out how you compete over time. The way you compete today, based on the market, is going to be dependent upon your ability to manage cash flow before you bring revenues in, or how fast you're going to bring those revenues in. There's no doubt in my mind there will be revenues. The question is when. And the question is who will be left standing at the end. The timing is definitely going to be the most difficult to figure out. And then, with all that being said, remember, one customer can make the difference between you being a successful business or not. There are many examples in the space. If you talk to our friends at Acker Biomarine and they talk about their customer around Mega Red, one big customer can be, not saying it's the only customer they have, but that's one big, successful, happy customer that's selling a lot of oils. And there's examples in other parts of the marketplace. So with that, if you can lock up one, you can do great. And the last point is you might look at some of the business models that have been really successful, and it's very difficult to do, but it includes taking a product and growing your own science. And then you're in total control. Photons is trying to do it. It's the one out of all the biotech companies here, all the algae companies with a biotech model that is out there trying to take their own product, to produce their own science, get some kind of an indication and go market it. It's very similar to what Martech did with their own product. They didn't wait for anybody to do it. They created their own product. They went to market. Same thing with Pronova. They went out. They took their own technology. They have their own product. And now they're extremely successful. So that's it. Thank you.